John Hennessey, how are you?
James, it's great. It's great to meet you, even though it's via Zoom, and look forward to meeting you in person at some point soon.
It would be fantastic to get yourself as well as your wonderful new car down to the bunker, meet you in person, but as we are stuck in the situation due to the way of the world, this is definitely second best option. So I thought it'd be great to dive straight into it first by just setting a little bit of context for anyone who doesn't perhaps know the backstory of Hennessy and some of the remarkable cars you built over the years. Would you mind just giving a bit of a backstory as to how it started?
Sure. This business, Hennessy Performance, began in 1991. As I tell people, it was a hobby that got out of control. And like all good racers, I learned the first rule of racing back in the early days, and that's if you want to make a small fortune in car racing, you start with a larger fortune. And as I was racing my Mitsubishi 3000 GT and going to the Silver State Classic, Pikes Peak, and Bonneville back in 1991, as I was having all that fun and setting a few records and won a race along the way, I watched my bank account kind of go south in the process, at which point I decided, man, if I'm going to keep doing this car thing, I got to figure out a way to get it to pay for itself. And so that's kind of where the journey began back in 1991, and here we are almost 30 years later.
There's a few cars which jump to my mind when I hear or read the word Hennessy, but are there any standout cars along the way that we should touch on before highlighting this latest car?
Sure. I mean, just to give some context, again, we've been around 29 years. Started off with the 3000 GT back in the early 90s. The vehicle that really probably put our brand and our name on the map was the Dodge Viper, and building our Venom Vipers back in the 90s and 2000s, culminating with a couple of our Venom 1000 twin turbo Vipers that won magazine shootouts and beat the likes of the Bugatti Veyron back on the cover of Road and Track back around 2005. So that really gained us a lot of notoriety, and our business really grew during that time. And then we saw a shift, I would say probably around 2010. We built a Ford Raptor that had twin turbos, and then built other that we would call the Velociraptor. And in the last 10 years, our business has really kind of shifted. We still do sports cars and muscle cars and Corvettes and things of that nature. We built a really cool Camaro that we called the Exorcist to compete with the Demon a couple years ago. But now our business today, if you were here in Sealy, Texas, cool Sealy, Texas this morning, you would see 100 vehicles on property, and about 2/3 of those vehicles are trucks and SUVs. And so within that genre of vehicles, we built a vehicle called the Velociraptor 6x6. So it's a 6-wheel drive Ford Raptor truck with 600 horsepower that's inspired by the brilliant AMG 6x6 truck. And so those are some of the highlight vehicles that we built over the years. One last vehicle that I think is a perfect lead into talking about the Venom F5 was kind of a crazy idea that we had back around 2007, and that was, what if we, and this really comes after we'd beat the Bugatti Veyron and the Road and Track magazine shootout in 05. We were kind of looking for the next mountain to climb, and we thought, we've modified Vipers, Corvettes, Ford GTs, but adding more horsepower isn't always the answer. We felt like we needed to go with something that was lighter in weight. And we just kind of kicked around the idea of, like, what if we took the Lotus Exige and we took out the little Toyota 4-banger and we put in our 1,000+ horsepower twin turbo V10 Viper engine in the back of that. And that was kind of like a joke, and I had a design guy based in the UK. I said, why don't you sketch out what that would look like? And I thought, man, that looks pretty cool. And then we did kind of more of a proper rendering. And I was at the SEMA show in 07, and a blog guy came up and said, hey, Hennessy, what's new? And I whip out this picture out of my backpack as I'm getting ready to go to the airport. I'm like, this is our Venom GT concept car. And like 2 days later, it's on the internet, and like two weeks later, I've got a couple guys from the Middle East wanting to order that car. And without going into too much great detail about that car, again, there was never a business plan. There was never, hey, let's build our own car. It was kind of like a crazy idea. And we decided to do it. And in that process, from 2010 to 2015, we built about a dozen of the Venom GTs, and a couple of highlights about that car. It beat the Veyron Super Sport in 2014 and ran 270 miles an hour at the shuttle landing runway down at NASA in Florida. And then 2 years after that, we took the roof off and we went out and ran 265 miles an hour for the world's fastest open top road car, and that record still stands. So those are, to answer your question, those are the vehicles that I think would be some of the highlight vehicles. There are others, but those are kind of some of our more widely known vehicles that we built in the last 29 plus years.
Fantastic. Well, I think you're right. This does transition as well onto F5, because as remarkable as that car was, this new car is very much 100% your car, right? It's carbon fiber cell built from the ground up.
Yeah, so when we were building the Venom GT and having some pretty incredible success with its performance, and it's still to this day, it's probably the most thrilling and exciting car that I've ever driven. Having that Lotus DNA and utilizing that Lotus cockpit, keeping the Lotus headlights and taillights, when people would see it primarily online, they would say, it still looks like a modified Lotus. And I just came to the realization that, and actually had a conversation with a good friend who's the chief marketing officer at one of the world's most valuable companies. And I showed him some different renderings as far as trying to make an evolution of the car and give it our more distinctive look. And I actually looked up the email exchange we had from March of 2017. I'm sorry, March of 2013, so 7.5 years ago.
Right.
And he said, John, you're not going to get credit for having your own car until you build your own car. And I just had kind of that was just one of those self-realization moments that I had where I thought, I got to put on my big boy pants and I've got to find a designer and find a way to build our team to where we can build our own car. So at that point in time, we didn't know what that car looked like. We didn't have a name. We didn't have a performance specification, but that journey began in early 13 and really kind of solidified in 2017, where we finally had the vision, budget, and specification, and that's the point where we were able to begin the exterior design of the F5, culminating with unveiling our full-scale design model, the piece of kit sitting behind me.
Yeah.
That we unveiled that at the SEMA show in November of 17. And that was really kind of, from there till now, there's been so much more work done in terms of, gosh, you've got a great looking design, but now you've got to build a car. There's a whole separate backstory to that.
When you set out, was the goal to predominantly build your own car from the ground up and have your name on it, or was there also an end goal to try and achieve something as the result of this car?
James, that's a great question. So again, our kind of DNA of myself, my family, and our company is we are always looking for the next mountain to climb. And over the last 29 years, we've had some successes, but we're not the kind of guys that just like rest on our laurels. We're looking for the next race. We're looking for the next performance mountain to climb. And so very early on, our intention with the Venom F5 was to make it the fastest. And there's a lot of discussion and conversations as far as what defines fastest. In our minds, we wanted to build a car at that time that was the fastest. And we thought, gosh, if we could break the magical 300-mile-per-hour mark, that would be incredible. Somewhere along in the journey, we thought, well, gosh, if we can get to 300 miles an hour, maybe we could go 500K, 500 kilometers, which is a little over 310.
Wow.
And clearly, over the last year and a half, Bugatti guys got over 300, and congrats to them. That's really an incredible achievement. But it really hasn't changed anything as far as what we were doing with the car. But I think the really cool thing that the world is going to see about the Venom F5 and that we've learned about the car, especially in the last 3 years, there's so much more to this car than absolute performance. And we can get into those details, and we'll talk about horsepower and simulated acceleration numbers, but I would really like to talk about the things that we haven't talked about up till now, and I would start with that the Venom F5 has been designed and will be a car that will stop and have great handling and great steering, and we're planning on testing it at some of the world's greatest racetracks, including Circuit of the Americas, which is about 100 miles from our workshop here outside of Houston. We're going to test at the Nordschleife at the Nurburgring, not to try to set a lap record there, but we feel it's very important to validate for our customers that this car, the intention with this car has evolved from 2017 till now. If I was going to give an analogy for a force of nature, I would refer to the F5. Our intended desire is to have it as the decathlete of the hypercar world. So
Brilliant.
it's able to do 10 different things really, really well. And hopefully, like a good decathlete may have 1 or 2 disciplines that they're really exceptional at, and we'll talk about what those things are.
Well, it's fantastic to hear that despite the fact it started out looking to be a heavy hitter in the world of ultimate top speeds, I think it does give so much more depth to a car when it also handles and you can enjoy it on a track, on road too. I mean, it's really impressive that you've gone and developed a carbon cell for this thing, both from, you know, just how seriously you're taking it, but I know the amount of R&D and effort that goes into building something like that. And weirdly, just seeing that, I think, speaks volumes about the overall ethos, really, of the car.
Well, to your point, after we unveiled the design model in 2017 and began doing a much deeper dive into the engineering process, the design engineering, extensive work on the aerodynamics of the car and CFD, it became very clear to us, and this again kind of follows after the Venom GT, is that not only is this car, the Venom F5, a ground up, all new bespoke design, but really every component of the car, all the way down to its absolute foundation of the monocoque chassis, had to be its own. There was nothing out there that we could say, oh, we could source this or use that. It really, in order to be able to achieve the performance goals and specifications, it fully had to become its own car, all the way starting with the chassis. So that piece, as you'll see, is 88 kilograms, and it's our own bespoke design. Yes. And if you look at the whole car itself, there are over 3,000 individual brand new parts that make up the Venom F5, including there are over 600 pieces of tooling just to manufacture the various carbon fiber components from the chassis to the bodywork and to the interior. So again, I think this, if I go back to 2013 and the vision for building our own car, if somebody told me back then what I know now, would I have still built the car and spent the time, money, gone through a flooded house in 2017 from Hurricane Harvey, and now going through a pandemic, which everybody's having a challenge during the pandemic? Would I have done that? I don't know that I would have, but I'm glad that we did. And again, I think that ultimately the car speaks for itself, but it is definitely more than just the sum of those 3,000 plus parts. And again, we feel like we've invested the right time with the right people. We have amazing partners that have supported us on the engineering side of things. And so kind of the next chapter is, now that the first car, our first prototype is completed, is to take it out and start testing it early 2021.
Fantastic. I read earlier that you've got some 3D printed titanium parts for like compressor housings and things like that.
When looking at the F5, the more time that you're able to spend with it and look at it up closely, there's so many details to the car. We don't have enough time on this chat, and hopefully at some point in the new year we can be together and we can do a much deeper dive. But if I was going to highlight just some really important items of the car, I mean, again, first and foremost, the engine is something that we've probably here in Texas have spent almost 5 years in development, and at 17 horsepower at 8,000 RPM on Shell E85 pump fuel.
That's amazing.
I believe that's the most powerful road car in the world. Again, there may be a few electrified cars that have a higher power output, but I think when you combine that power level in our 6.6 liter, again, in-house built twin turbo classic American V8, again, on the dyno, it sounds crazy, and hearing the car in person, it's amazing, but I really look forward to hearing the car once we get it out on the runway, and we have a test track here next to our workshop. Fantastic. We can test the car. Another, I think, really cool highlight of the car, besides the unbelievable power, is that within that power, we've designed that power to be, again, we have a specific F5 mode where we unlock that level of power. But in the other driver modes, we're not going to, we want the driver to be able to drive the car comfortably on a B road in the UK. We want them to be able to drive the car in traffic. So this is not some crazy one-off, go crazy fast in a straight line. It will properly accelerate to a very quick speed and a high speed. But we want our customers to be able to go out and enjoy the car in various conditions. So I think that's another important feature. And I think when you start looking at the car, and especially when you look at the interior of the car, our design director, Nathan Malinek, designed the interior to where it would have the functionality of kind of somewhere between an F1 car and a fighter jet. It's very focused. It's very, the steering, the controls. And Nathan even shared with me somewhere along the way in our journey that he felt like the guys that are intending to drive the F5 at a very high level, they're really almost in the realm of being an aircraft pilot as much as they are being a driver of a very serious car. So you'll see in the steering wheel design, the controls of the steering wheel, the instrument panel and the display. Even the display has been inspired by NASA, spacecraft, Apollo, and old school jet fighter aircraft like an F4 Phantom. The display in F5 mode almost looks like something that you would have like laser lock when Maverick is trying to shoot down the bad guys in Top Gun. So I think that those are just a few highlight details. Again, the more time you spend with the car, the more things you'll notice, and I think we'll enjoy having future conversations, especially once we get the car out and driving it and get it going fast.
Absolutely. Well, John, I think we'll save the talk for next time, because absolutely in future, hopefully when things return to a little bit more normality, it'll be great to get either you over here or us over there and have a proper one-on-one walk and talk. And no doubt at that point as well, things will have evolved a bit further, and who knows, we might be able to hear this thing running and see it driving. So that would be awesome.
Thank you, James. Looking forward to it. And maybe we can join you for the Goodwood Festival of Speed next summer.
Oh, that would be amazing.
So we'll see.
It's the first year I've missed this in years. It's been such a shame. Brilliant.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on the car. I can't wait to hear more about it soon.
Thanks, James.
Thanks
Cheers.
Cheers, bud.
Bye.